Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest rendition of Tales from Outer Space. Taken from the subreddit HFY. All the relevant links will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy, and if you do, please consider supporting the channel. Now, on to the science fiction. The Infiltrator, written by ack1308. Counselor Forrest watched the intake airlock carefully. His secondary arms twitched occasionally, but he kept the reflex under control. His primordial ancestors, he had been told, had once grasped prey with those arms while their clawed primary arms disemboweled the unfortunate creature. Now, 10 million years hence, he lacked the majority of the grasping strength, as well as all but the vestigial declaw, but the instinct remained. Members of Faris's species, the Hanak, occasionally stepped out of the airlock, as did the representatives of half a dozen other species. But Faris ignored them all. He was looking for one particular body type and one species within it. He awaited a human. A group of 3 such stepped out the airlock, laughing and chatting with each other. But he looked past them. None of these were the one he sought. Where is he? And then a lone human emerged, sandwiched between a hulking Gyroas and an insectile Stepping away from the other 2, he looked around until his wary gaze met Faris's. A little of the tension went out of the posture at the mutual recognition, and he made a discreet gesture with his single left hand that came straight from the Hanak's secondary hand signals. "I greet you, brother." Faris replied in kind and murmured a command into his implanted radio. In response, a maintenance door opened as if by accident. Moving with a studied casualness, the forked human strolled in that direction and ducked into the doorway. It closed again immediately. Faris left a few moments later by a convenient exit. They convened in Faris's quarters half the station away. To an outsider, the seeming human would have looked and sounded strange as it greeted Faris in perfect Hanak, and lowered himself into a seated position only those the Hanak hip arrangement could manage. Faris handed him a feeding bowl, and he tapped the opening with a very Hanak sigh of enjoyment. "Ah, I've missed those," he declared. "Humans can digest it, but they apparently dislike the taste, so there's no market for it." Faris filed away that tidbit of information. A captive population of humans would not be in a position to decline foodstuffs not to their taste. "That's interesting, Tareth," he allowed, "but you didn't undergo years of excruciating surgeries to talk about their likes and dislikes. Do you have an answer to the most important question?" He leaned forward. "Can we conquer them?" Tareth considered the question. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "but it won't be worth it. Too risky." Faris stared at him. "What do you mean, not worth it?" "I mean that there's a lot of information that humans don't let off the planet," Tareth explained. "Humans are a lot more dangerous than they let us think they are. Just for instance, than the nation they call the United States. Everyone goes armed all the time with firearms that would be high military grade on any other planet. In the Eurasian sector, every cubic meter of sky is so saturated by sensory systems that they could fry a landing force merely by turning on all of their radar systems at once." Faris was shaken, but he refused to admit defeat. "There are other continents, are there not?" "There are," agreed Tareth. "Antarctica is overrun with polar bears since they moved a breeding pair down there to save the species. Imagine a predator that weighs over a ton, can run as fast as a ground car, and you can't see it coming. And that's if the killer penguins haven't already got you." "Killer penguins?" asked Faris faintly. "Oh yes, someone got the idea that the polar bears shouldn't have it all their own way. So they bred a bigger, smarter penguin, which turned out to be psychotic enough to take on the killer whales. Also, the place is below freezing all year round, and really below freezing for half that time." "Not Antarctica then," conceded Faris. "One of the others. Well, in Africa there are large areas not inhabited by humans, began Tareth, which would allow us to land more or less undetected and establish a secure beachhead. Varys seized upon the good news. Well, no. You didn't let me finish. Tareth took another hit from the feeding bulb. This is because the amount of poaching drove several big game animals to the brink of extinction, so they genetically engineered them to be a lot smarter and virtually bulletproof. Now the animals consider hunting any humans or human-like creatures they encounter to be a fun activity, and they're good at it. Varys felt his secondary arms twitching in agitation and forcibly restrained them. Where else is there? I understand there are more continents. Tareth made a gesture of agreement. South America is also awash. There's a nasty little war that's been going on for years. All 4 sides of this war will shoot at anyone who's not one of them. And then there's Australia. He let out a sigh. Are they just insane there? Demanded Varys. More, declared Tareth. They took a relatively inoffensive herbivore and turned it into a 50-kilo carnivore monster that drops out of trees onto unwary travelers. Also, their snakes and spiders were already the most dangerous on the planet, and they decided to make them more so. Neurotoxins that'll stop both your hearts in just seconds, and they choose to live amongst them. Varys digested that information. Orbital bombardment. They've equipped nuclear warheads with jump drives, surface to orbit pinpoint accuracy. Tareth gestured to his feeding bulb. Also, their moon is one big military base, with tens of thousands of ships ready to launch at a moment's notice. I can't believe this, Varys spelled back. How could our intelligence surface fall down so badly? I never heard about any of this before. Tareth cleared his throat, a very human sound. Well, that's partly because your intelligence services couldn't find their cloacal orifices with all 4 hands on an anatomy text, and partly because I've been feeding you lies this whole time. He grinned cheerfully. Well, some of it anyway. What are you talking about? Varys stared at Tareth. The forked human infiltrator had shifted posture, and now his body language was all human. Tareth? Nope, not Tareth. Captain James Kendall, Counter-Espionage Service. Tareth is still back on Earth. We had him in custody since about 2 weeks after he landed. Varys' guest seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. Varys himself was struggling to understand. I don't believe it. Kendall put a bulb aside and stood up. Varys flinched as he reached into the inner pocket, but he merely produced a still image. It was of himself and, almost himself. Me and Tareth took a year to get the surgery done, and then the next 4 to learn how to be Tareth, he chuckled. A human pretending to be a Hannock, pretending to be a human. I won't say that it hasn't been interesting. But why? Why reveal yourself? The human's lips drew back in a predatorial grin. To send a message. We've been doing this for millennia. We can and will see you coming. And I was able to get a load with you with no problems at all. He tilted his head. Besides, not everything I told you was a lie. Want to bet your man's lives on what's true and what's not. Varys drew deep breaths, trying to regain control of the situation. I could have you seized, interrogated. We still have Tareth. Kendall's voice cut across his. He hasn't been mistreated. In fact, he's quite comfortable. But whatever you do to me happens to him. There was no way out of it. The humans had won the war without firing a shot. So, if we release you, he gets to come home. Kendall shrugged. If he wants to, sure. He's really very comfortable. Varys didn't even know how to take that. Fine, you can go. Thanks. Kendall finished off the feeding bulb and tossed it into the waste receptacle. Oh, by the way, I lied. I lied about us hating that stuff. We love it. Maybe something to sweeten up the peace accord between us. Whistling a tune Varys didn't recognize, he strolled out the room. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.